Welcome back to the Mind Body Mushroom, the podcast where we explore holistic health, personal growth, and the mindset shifts that drive high performance. I'm your host, Jordan Ryan, and as always, this episode is brought to you by Wind and Sea Coffee, adaptogen coffee for coffee lovers. We craft the world's best tasting mushroom coffee to fuel both the body and mind because good habits don't have to suck. My guest today is Mike Morgan, a retired law enforcement officer who spent nearly 3 decades on the front lines, first with the Atlanta PD and then with Suffolk County PD in New York. Like many who serve, Mike carried the weight of that experience long after the badge came off. After retiring in 2022, he was met with the heavy realities of PTSD, depression, and unresolved trauma, things we talk about often on the show. But instead of staying stuck in that pain, Mike leaned into the work. His healing began with plant medicine, specifically ayahuasca, and then that journey cracked open something deeper. It not only helped him process what he had been carrying, but it gave him a renewed sense of purpose. Today, Mike is dedicating his life to helping other veterans and first responders find their own path to healing through these powerful modalities. This is raw, honest, and an important conversation about trauma, trust, and transformation. Mike, welcome to the show.
Jordan, thank you very much for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your time with us, man. So,
Absolutely.
Mike, you spent nearly 30 years in law enforcement. If you could go back and sit with yourself on day one of the job, knowing everything that you've been through, what would you say?
Great question. I was actually speaking to someone about that earlier today, asking him the same question.
Hmm.
What would I say? I think there are many things that I would say, but one is do not lose yourself because it is super, super easy. You are going to be surrounded by death and destruction literally from the get-go. Within my first hour coming out of field training, being on the street, I saw my first homicide and it only got worse from there. So I would tell myself the importance of maintaining mental health and awareness
Hmm.
and processing the traumas that I saw instead of just burying them,
Yeah.
compartmentalizing, we call it, because eventually that Pandora's box is going to open up, man. It's not going to be pretty when it does.
Yeah. We had Matt Domiancic on the show. I'll introduce you guys if you aren't familiar, but he's also a former law enforcement and talks a lot about how, trying to move the intervention from right of bang to left of bang, so it seems like, I mean, even in the military as well, but there's been at least a little bit more time and attention given to, preventative health, mental health awareness, normalizing talking about these things. But within the law enforcement first responder community, it still feels like it's fairly reactive. It happens, after, you have some incident where now they got to take your gun and your badge and you got to go speak to the counselors kind of deal. It's almost like a punitive way, as opposed to getting ahead of it. Did you kind of experience a similar reality of life on the force?
Yeah, I mean, that is reality. By the way, so your portion of your podcast with Matt, it was a great podcast, very intelligent guy, very informative. But yeah, I mean, that's reality. Reality is, and unfortunately to this day, that a lot of times guys go to seek help. And I think the stigma is starting to get released and departments are becoming more proactive. But back in the day, man, when you sought help, a lot of times your gun was taken and you were taken off the street. I myself never really experienced anything when I was active. Mine was more along the lines of retirement when I had time to think. And that's
Mm,
where things started building up for me.
mm,
But I saw plenty of incidents where guys went to ask for help and, well, excuse me, guys should have or were going to ask for help. And then they saw examples of others who did and then got that punitive treatment. And, it dissuaded them from doing so. Once a gun
yeah,
and badge is taken away from, it's part of your identity. Everyone knows what's going on. So they're all like, delve into your personal life. Well, policing is like wash women, man. The
mm,
gossiping that goes on is incredible. I'm sure it's the same in the military, but everyone knows your fucking business,
yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah, 100%. So let's back up a little bit, but I kind of want
Sure.
to ask you your bio in a different way. So if someone were to write your biography, what would be like the main plot line? How would you kind of tell your story? And I want to dive into some of the experiences that you experienced on the force, because that I'm sure contributed to the main conflict, right?
Yeah, my bio. I guess I got into it's funny because growing up, I had no intention of ever getting into law enforcement. My
Mm,
father was a cop for 1 year in the NYPD, then he rolled over, they call it, to FDNY, where he was a fireman for the next 35 years. So he did
mm.
36 total. And growing up, his whole thing was my kid's never going to take a civil service exam. He wanted white collar jobs for both of us. My sister became an attorney. I actually have an accounting degree um, from Hofstra University. The
Oh,
first
nice.
day, yeah, first day I started my corporate job back in I guess October '91. I'm taking a Long Island Railroad, the train into Manhattan. Not excited at all. I was like so flat, and I'm kind of asking myself, man, like, why aren't you more excited? Like, this is the first day of the rest of your life, new career, this and that.
Right.
So I get introduced to a bunch of associates, bosses, and I'm given a task about 11 a.m. And all of a sudden, I wake up. I'd fallen asleep, my head in my hands. My first
No.
day, 3 hours on a job. I get up, immediately walked over to another cubicle. This dude seemed really cool that I just met. I'm like, hey, brother, you like this shit? He's like, fuck no, I hate it. I'm like, there's no way I'm sitting in a cubicle for the next 35 years of my life, making no difference to anybody. No one's going to
Mhm,
know whether I even lived or died, except for my close
mm,
family and friends. And that's
right.
when I started getting a little introspective about what I wanted to do in my life.
Mm,
Law enforcement came to the forefront. I decided that was it. I wanted to go to the FBI at the time, but they were on a federal hiring freeze. So that's actually how I got into law enforcement. I applied to the Atlanta Police Department, and with the intention of making a little bit of a difference in life. It's not like you're going to stop crime or anything like that,
sure.
but I wanted to help people. I hated bullying growing up. I wanted to protect as many people as I could. So I went into it with pure and noble intentions.
Mm. Now, so you're in Atlanta. You kind of, you're a new guy on the force, and you mentioned a second ago that like first day on the job, you're dealing with your first homicide. What was that like?
Yeah, it was crazy. It was actually two. So we finished the academy. We didn't graduate until field training was over. So we finished on a Monday. The next day, Tuesday, I'm starting field training. I was working midnights. So we start 11 p to 7 a. So I go to work Tuesday night, 11 p.m. By 12 a.m., I get brought to my first homicide seen by my FTO, field training officer. And it was a very interesting story. It was a Atlanta fire captain who was on suspension for sexual allegations with him against younger girls.
Oh
So on
shit.
this particular night, they were proven to be true. He had picked up a prostitute. She was 16 years old. I guess he had a crack problem because he went to buy a rock. Pulls up to the local dope boy on the corner, and this is crazy, man. You talk about the universe at work. The dope boy looks in the car, and who does he see but his 16-year-old cousin, who's the prostitute? Pulls out his gun, boom, one in the head, kills the fire captain. Yeah, it was crazy. I get to see him, man. His brain matter everywhere. Um, I can't say it's something that really affected me negatively. When I look back, as far as dope boys, my thing was they chose to be there. It's a violent profession. Whatever happens to you guys, you knew that going in. So that was something that never really, I hate to say it, never affected me negatively. But that was, critical incident number one within the first hour.
Mm-hmm.
4 hours later, my partner pulled into a parking lot. He's taking a little nap, and we get a 15-4, which is the shooting ambulance en route. It was so funny because he's snoring with the seat reclined. Before I could say his name, the seat was up, the car was in park. He hits the gas and he answers the call. I'm like, holy shit, this guy's
Wow.
Superman. So we get to that call. Second guy, DOA. Eyes
Wow.
were open. He was flat on the pavement looking up. And I can't tell you how many homicides I've been to, but my thought process was, man, 5 minutes ago, this cat was alive and living his life. And that was my
Wow.
first night on the job. Two homicides. My fellow rookie, was in my academy mate, was there with his FDO. I look at him. I'm like, O'Neill, what the fuck do we get ourselves into? Because it
Right.
only got crazier. But truth being told, I loved it, man. I was an adrenaline junkie, but it was
Yeah.
insane.
Right. So that was kind of something I was going to ask is maybe, you know, we can, I'll save this, for a little bit later, but I want to ask how maybe you changed as a person or your mentality from the guy that was on the police force to the guy that was, kind of retired and figuring out this next chapter. So, I mean, adrenaline junkie, that was clear. Counting was not it. Were you having like fun? I guess that's maybe a weird way of putting it. But were you like kind of digging the excitement of what was going on while you were there?
I loved it.
Yeah.
Loved it. I can't tell you. You're a military member.
Yeah.
There's nothing like chasing
Yeah.
hunting another man. There's nothing like it.
Yeah.
Evil men hunting evil men. I mean, it gets into your soul, man. I loved it. I loved my thing was stolen cars and running dope. So I was constantly getting in foot chases, car chases. Um, I loved it. I trained with a guy, so I was very comfortable with extreme violence in terms of fighting. So it was nothing I feared. I
Right.
loved it. I told one of my supervisors one day, I'm like, I'll do this shit for free.
Right.
But it gets old quickly as
Really?
well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when did it start kind of getting old? And was there like a specific incident that we were kind of like, whoa, this is a little different. This isn't like, people choosing a life of crime, kind of experiencing the consequences of their actions versus like the victimization of the innocent in it and being like, damn, I have to be the front line there.
I would say in terms of it changing, you just get burnt out. I mean,
Mm.
I was
Hmm.
handling, I was on evening watch, and it would not be out of the ordinary to be handling 30 calls a night. So when I went to day tour, I thought it'd be a lot less. We were still banging out 15 to 20 calls. So it was just constant,
Hmm.
constant, constant. And to answer your other portion, the thing that did affect me was dealing with good people and seeing whatever it may be, death, destruction, or just bad luck coming into their lives. I remember, for instance, my first time I had to apply UCPR, I got called
Hmm.
to an unresponsive 11-year-old. And in Atlanta, when I was with Suffolk County, we were basic EMTs, so we had a lot more medical training. In Atlanta, it was literally, I think, just CPR was the extent of our training. But I get to this house, and it's a mother, grandmother, and aunt in a room, in a living room, and his 11-year-old in the room, eyes open, lying on his back. They're all in hysterics. I feel him. He's cold to the touch. I knew he's dead. No one's going to help this kid, but there was no way it was not going to work him until paramedics got there. So I'm doing CPR, and I hear liquid coming up closer and closer to his mouth as I'm doing compressions. I'm like,
Oh
I'm
shit.
no doctor, but what the fuck is that? Should not
Right.
be there.
Right.
So as those guys are rolling in, the paramedics come in. I turn him on his side, and liquid just pours out of this kid's mouth. Well, it turns out he died of bacterial meningitis. So
Wow.
obviously these ladies, their lives are never going to be the same again. And I remember I had to transport one, two jumped in the ambulance. They still transported the kid. And she's like, Officer, please tell me he's going to be all right. And one thing I always tell rookies, you never promise something that you know you cannot deliver. So I said, ma'am, I promise you to work him as hard as they can. I would never say he's going to be all right.
Mm.
And, we got to the hospital, they delivered the news. Had I not have to they had to give me a massive dose of antibiotics and told me essentially to quarantine for 48 hours. There was very low likelihood that we'd transmit from a child to an adult, but I
Mm.
still had to do that. Had that not been the case, and I was going to go back in service, I would have been back in service a half hour later after seeing and going through that. No time to process it, talking to no one, just going on to the next bullshit call, wherever it was. And you're supposed to like flip the switch on and off, like,
Hmm.
I'm back to normal.
Hmm.
I didn't just experience or see what I just saw. This
Right.
poor 11-year-old kid and these women, having a life turned upside down. Those three lives were before they met Mike Morgan and after they met Mike Morgan, and that's the
Hmm.
thing. And that I always had the mistaken belief that PTSD was only caused by seeing your brother or sister next to you killed.
Hmm.
But mine was being inside the most devastatingly intimate moments of other people's lives.
Yeah, that's something I was going to ask was, you know, do you talk a little bit about how a lot of people kind of associate PTSD with just being these traumatic experiences, seeing death, destruction, and without a doubt, I'm sure there is a component of that to it. But what I've been finding in a lot of talking with a lot of people is that sometimes the PTSD comes from other sources, or it's like it's not what you expect, especially if you kind of go into it with the mindset they're like, I'm signing up for a job that includes death and destruction, like
Yeah.
seeing death and destruction. Yeah, maybe you're not ready for what the reality of it, but you do have some sort of sense of what it is you're stepping into. Whereas it feels like often it's like the surprises, that pop up, and that's what becomes such a challenge to cope with. Where do you think the root of the real trauma that you had to deal with later, and we'll get into that, but where do you think that the root of that trauma came from?
I think we all bring trauma. Listen, no one's just escaping life's punches unscathed. So I'd love Rocky's speech to his son and Rocky Balboa, where he talks about life hitting hard and no one being able to duck those punches. Because
Mm,
I don't care how rich you are, how good looking you are, how tough you are, how funny you are, it does not matter, man. No one's escaping the trauma of life.
right.
And looking back now, I had a very contentious relationship with my father. And I think
Hmm.
that's a
I was waiting for
very,
it. I was waiting
yeah,
for it, dude.
very big. I didn't realize it
Yeah.
until I started this healing journey. It is the overwhelming majority of guys have
Mm-hmm.
not had good relationships with their pops. And I think, I don't know if it's us trying to prove ourselves to them or
Mm-hmm.
us fortifying ourselves to not let anyone hurt us again, maybe a combination thereof. But, I learned he was mentally abusive. My father's deceased. I feel bad talking about it sometimes, but it's reality, so I must address it.
Yeah.
There was mental abuse there, and I learned early to kind of compartmentalize that stuff and callous up as a
Mm-hmm.
result because they're a very sensitive kid, and it just kind of fortified itself going into this profession. It was easy for me to do, to be honest with you. Compartmentalize, I just in one ear out the other, or what I saw, just bam, in and out. And again, it never really affected me while I was active. It was afterwards that that it struck me the way it did.
Right. Did you have any coping mechanisms while you were in that was, what were your coping mechanisms?
I, physically, I always ate well. I always trained. Always kept in good shape. As far as talking about things, maybe when we all went out at night, we were drinking, we would BS about it, but nothing, no like true impactful mental processes. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't journaling, I wasn't
Yeah.
talking to anyone on any regular basis. You just literally you just push it down and you go on to the next. And I never thought about it, to be honest with you. It was just that was my normality. That was my
Right.
normal.
Right. Right. So, I mean, most people after they retire, they kind of relax. What made you jump headfirst into ayahuasca and plant medicine, psychedelics in general?
Actually, I didn't. It was definitely a time period. So
Hmm.
I got hurt in September of 2020. I blew out my back, herniated 4 discs.
Ah,
So we tried conservative
similar
treatment for the first
story.
6 months. What's that?
I have a similar story. Yeah,
Oh, do you really?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry to throw you off, but
The
yeah,
back's the greatest thing in the
yeah,
world, isn't it? So it's so commonplace with us in these professions. But
yeah.
so we tried conservative treatments. That didn't work. So I got a laminectomy in April of 2021.
Ah,
That
fuck.
cured some of the problems. But my neurosurgeon's like, listen, you're probably looking at a spinal fusion down the
Mhm.
line. We're going to try to put it off as much as possible. But okay, so I recouped from the laminectomy and I went back to work 6 months later in October. Literally was working for 3 days. I was on a desk, light duty, and I just couldn't do it. Went to my CO. I'm like, Inspector, I'm not a punk. I'm like, I would be on the street right now if I could. I hate the desk, number one, but I can't do it, man.
Mhm.
And I think I'm gonna have to get the second surgery. So I went back, started doing a few more treatments. That we were trying like epidurals, nerve
Mhm.
ablations,
Mhm.
everything you could do
Mhm.
prior to that surgery,
Mhm.
and nothing was working. So I got the spinal
Mhm.
fusion April 22, got retired that following October. Now, during this 2 year time period, I'm not allowed to work. I'm not allowed to volunteer. Not allowed to go to the gym. I built one in my basement, but you're not allowed to do anything. They have a
Mhm.
unit that follows guys. They videotape them. If they catch you getting into the car too smoothly, they'll produce that as evidence. Like, see, this guy isn't hurt. Meanwhile, I had confirmed
Oh my
MRIs.
God! No
At the time,
shit.
I'm 54 years old,
R-
400 discs, one surgery, going in for another surgery. It's not like I'm making this stuff up. So, I started getting these feelings of anger, depression. I
Yeah.
just was not feeling myself.
Yeah.
And I'm very self aware. I knew I wasn't happy, but I was not sure the origination.
Mm.
And looking back now, it was, even though I wasn't retired yet, I'm no longer this thing. I'm no longer part of this thing I was for 30 years.
Mhm.
The brotherhood's gone for me because, when you're out, man, that phone's not
Yeah.
ringing. Out of
Totally.
sight, out of mind. It
Totally.
sucks, but it's the truth. And the guys really need to lend a lot of credence to the fact that these factors are going to weigh on you heavily if you do not process them.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize what was coming, to be honest with you.
Right.
So
Right.
as I spoke about April 23, I sat down. It was a nice spring day. I lived on Long Island at the time, Smithtown. I set up my iPad. I'm watching a Sean Ryan podcast, and he's interviewing a man named Eddie Penny. He's a former SEAL Navy's Team 6 guy. And he's recounting the story of the Extortion 17 incident in which a Chinook got down in Afghanistan, got shot down by insurgents, hit it with an RPG. 17 SEALs were killed and 38 souls were board. At the time, and it still may be that was the largest loss of SEALs in the history of their community. And then Eddie's talking about escorting his best friend Jason Workman's body back to his hometown. So as he's telling the story, he's visibly upset, rightly so. And I started concurrently thinking about a call that I had 5 years before about a beautiful 2-year-old girl found floating in a pool named Dana Sikorsky. And I just lost it. I started crying like a baby. And my first reaction still blows me away to this day was I looked in the house to make sure my wife had not come home from food shopping because I was so embarrassed to be crying.
Wow.
And it's funny because my wife's a life coach. She's been on this higher consciousness thing for years. She would have hugged me and encouraged me to let it out.
Right.
But man, we don't show showing emotion is
Yeah.
weakness. We don't do that.
Right.
And I instantaneously kind of realized, man, like a snap of a finger, I'm like, I think I have PTSD. I think that's what's been going on. And I realized, I'm like, fuck this, man. Life is too short. I am not walking around with this the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I need help. But I did not think that talking to a traditional counselor, man or woman sitting behind a desk, and I'm going to tell them what I've done, what I've seen, and they're going to be able to help me.
Right.
Just, I didn't think it was going to be possible. And prior to, and from that point on, really paying attention, I had seen guys talking about using plant-based medicines to heal. And, these are some of the strongest mentally fortitude men in the world,
Mm-hmm.
special operators, Delta, Green Berets, SEALs, PJs. And these guys are all talking about coming back from from war, broken men. I'm like, who the fuck am I to be pessimistic about this? These guys are talking about healing them.
Right.
And that was it. I decided ayahuasca was going to be the route that I was going to approach. And my wife and I moved out of Florida in December of 23. During the course of that move, my wife, she's the best researcher in the world, had found a facility no longer in existence, but it was called Soul Quest Ayahuasca Church in Orlando. And last March 1st, we went down and journeyed. It was a 3-day weekend. And I can honestly say on the first Friday night, journey, my life was literally changed forever. Like what I
Wow.
experienced is inexplicable. For people who have been through it, they understand. People who don't, it's like anytime I speak about it, as soon as I talking about it, it's like the words just
Huh.
dull the magic. I don't know. It's inexplicable. It's the most profound cathartic thing I've ever experienced in my life. It changed me, changed my soul, just changed me as a man.
Now, had you ever experienced psychedelics before that, or kind of
Never.
drug, smoked weed, or anything like that? I mean, probably not. You were, a cop.
Well, don't say that because there's plenty of that. But yeah, I was not like a guy that really experimented with drugs. I smoked weed in high school.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
fervently anti-drug.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's another thing for, because a lot of people are down in this medicine. I think it's the funniest thing that there's a stigma for plant-based medicines, natural medicines that have been used for thousands of years.
Right.
But when you talk about a first responder or a vet that's been put on, in one case, I was talking to Green Beret, he was on 17 medications.
Mm-hmm.
There's no stigma for putting him on 17 medications.
Nope.
But when he's talking about healing for plant-based medicines,
Yeah.
everyone's like, what are you shitting me? Using drugs?
Dude, 100%. So my first product was CBD infused coffee, and the reason why is because I went to college at the University of Oregon. Like I had done psychedelics, smoked weed, all the stuff. But while I was in, I was I couldn't use any of it, and then I got injured, and I was kind of riding this med separation out, going through all the same shit, losing your reputation, losing your identity, losing your mobility. I'm like, I'm ever gonna fucking do all this shit. I took pride in the fact that I was like an animal,
Yeah.
and now I'm fragile, I'm delicate, and my reputation is taking a hit. So, it was really tough. But if I had decided on a Friday night to just go hit the bars, get absolutely shit-faced, like, no one would have said anything. In fact, it would have been like I would have been there with my friends doing that, But if I wanted to like stay home, sit on the couch, eat an edible, and watch a movie, I would lose my job, my benefits, like everything, my health care, all sorts of shit. So, I remember thinking about that at the time, being like, dude, what the fuck? Like, this is such a, it's such a backwards kind of, system. But, so CBD was sort of this like I've kind of saw it as like a loophole in a way. I'm like, I can get maybe the medicinal benefits of cannabis, but I'm not breaking any rule because I'm not going to risk my job over, and the rest of my life and all these benefits.
Sure.
And so then I started getting relief from like anxiety. I was sleeping a little bit better. It helps with inflammation. But I was still taking like tinctures and shit. And like, I wasn't really like, I'd forget to take them. They tasted
Yep.
bad. So I created this product initially. And then I remember thinking to myself, like, I'm so stoked to share this with my active duty friends because they can, everyone's dealing with this shit. You don't just have to be we're all injured. That's
Hell
sort
yeah.
of it. It's just like
Yeah.
what's going to be the straw that breaks my back, literally in my case. But and then shortly after I had separated, they made this policy like for all federal employees, military, etc., that CBD was off limits. And
Really?
yeah, dude, I think
Wow.
it's still to this day, even though there's it's federally legal. You can
Yeah.
have, it's through the 2018 Farm Bill. All CBD is it's federally legal, so it's legal in all 50 states. But for whatever reason, they just made like a policy. My guess, and I don't know this for a fact, but my guess is because I figured guys were maybe like smoking weed or something, and then they'd piss hot and be like, oh shit, it must be the CBD I'm taking, because it's like technically possible, but like, and then they weren't going to change the drug test for it. They still don't test for CBD, but they sort of just made this like blanket rule that just was like, you know what? All right, wise guy, like we're just going to
Yeah.
make a rule. But to your point, and the reason I went on this whole diatribe is that like, they'll fucking mail you a bag full of pills and then pills for the side effects of those pills. And then your brain will melt to mush. And don't worry, they have a nice VA medical facility that they can, lock you up in for the rest of
Yep.
your life. But, if you try going down a naturalistic homeopathic path, I mean, you got to be careful if you talk to your doctor and say, yeah, even if you're out and you're like, hey, I use THC products, that could affect, what medications they give you, what not, so it's totally backwards, dude.
Yeah.
But okay, cool. So can you walk me through like even just the logistics, I guess, of your first ceremony that you went through? So it was in
Yeah.
Orlando, you kind of found this spot. Take it away.
Yeah, so we found a spot, and the way that they used to have their retreats was you would drink on a Friday night. You could drink as an optional Saturday morning, and then Saturday night as well. So it was 3 ceremonies, and it's very sacred medicine. I consider it very sacred. There are beautiful ceremonial things that they do every time that you're about to drink. Again, they've been going on for thousands of years. And for people to know, this is the crazy thing about ayahuasca. So ayahuasca is sourced from 2 vines, and if you don't use both in conjunction with each other, there are no psychedelic effects. They're inert essentially, and there are 80,000 vines in the Amazon River, the Amazon forest. So the
Wow.
fact that someone thousands of years ago was told by some higher power to use
Mm-hmm.
these two in conjunction with each other
Mm-hmm.
because they would not work any other way should tell you all you need to know. You can
Right.
tell me that there's not a higher power at work here.
Right.
And essentially, all you do for the preparation is they boil them down over a long period of time.
Huh.
I've heard some guys' formula is as short as like 15 hours, others as long as 40 something hours. But they're essentially boiling it down, and you get a liquid. You got to drain out the impurities of the liquid, and the ayahuasca is what you got to drink. So
Hmm.
you go there, and the dynamic is pretty funny because I got there, and you get a lot of what's the word I want to use here? I don't know if hippies is the word,
Mm,
but you're not looking at, I'm used to hanging out with alpha males,
mm.
and it's not that. You'll see some, but so we get to Friday, I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? This ain't my gig. And by Sunday, man, you're hugging everyone. Everyone knows about everyone else's deepest, darkest,
Cool.
most intimate secrets. Like beautiful.
Right. Right.
But we sit down Friday night and we drink. For me, it usually takes about 45 minutes or so to kind of kick in.
Mm-hmm.
And the ground started moving in my journey. I'm like, here we go.
Mm.
And all the colors that you see become like the most vivid, dynamic colors you can see. Usually see geometric patterns, which is like the craziest thing because most people echo that sentiment.
Yeah.
And most people also say that they sense a female presence. They call it mother or mother ayahuasca. And it was the same for me. It was my
Mm.
first experience was essentially as though I was looking at a big screen TV in the sky, and mother was in the left hand corner. And
Mm.
I remember I had my arms like open wide, and I was crying. Still get emotional sometimes. And I was like, I need help. I'm like, I need to get rid of this anger, this rage, this hate. Please, I don't know what to do.
Mm.
And it was like everything I asked for was just granted at like the snap of
Wow.
a finger. Like I was just getting lighter and lighter and lighter. And during the course of the ceremony, she was bringing my father to me, and he didn't show. And I remember throwing my hands up in the air. I'm like, fucking coward. I knew he wouldn't show. He can't talk about emotion. But the 55 years of everything between he and I at that point was just gone. There was like
Yeah.
no emotional charge to the memories anymore. It
Wow.
was crazy.
Wow.
And, I got so many messages. Um, One of them was I kind of disappeared into thin air. I got medically retired. So I was gone for 2 years.
Yeah.
There was no goodbyes. There was no retirement party. Just
Hmm.
kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I guess I wasn't at peace with the fact that I was no longer this thing.
Hmm.
And she told me, she's like, you are no longer this thing. You did your job.
Hmm.
It's on to the next generation.
Hmm.
Just be at peace with what you did. She's like, everything that's inside you is no longer up here. It's down here. If you need it, you will always be that warrior, but you
Hmm.
don't need everything that comes with it.
Mm.
Because guys
Wow.
ask me, like, bro, will I lose my edge? I'm like,
Right.
nah, man. If you got to get down, you're still going to get down.
Yeah.
But you got to get down with a little more empathy in your heart.
Right.
And I remember I was watching the volunteers, and I'm like, I want to be like these people. And I always associated strength with like physical strength, physical
Hmm.
stature, fighting ability. Yeah, maybe there's a place for that, but I'm watching them. It was so loving and graceful, just helping us. I'm like, I want to be like them. Remember, I'm crying as I'm saying this. I'm like, that's what I want to be like. And it was like empathy put into my heart. It was like the
Wow.
craziest experience of my life. And I just came out of it with like so much more empathy for everything.
Right.
And I can't explain it. As I'm coming out of Journey 2, this is a very important part that I skipped. Two coworkers of mine from Suffolk County PD committed suicide 3 weeks before, a week apart. The sergeant killed himself in the precinct locker room. And I never had any intention whatsoever of getting into the space. But clearly, as you and I are talking, the universe was like, you're healed. It's not linear. Obviously, you still
Yeah.
have ebbs and
Of course.
flows, but your life's purpose now is to go forth and help other first responders and vets heal
Wow.
theirs. And I literally said it out loud, okay, wasn't sure how it was going to be implemented, but I'm like, I now have my life's purpose. And man, Jordan, I'll tell you, like, I came out of that. My wife and I were kind of separated. They encourage couples not to stay close to each other
Mm.
so you don't get distracted. So I
Hmm.
saw my wife a few hours later, and I was like, I can't believe it just happened. Like, it was the most profound cathartic thing again that's ever
Wow.
happened to me. I was a changed man, instantaneous, in 4 hours.
That's incredible. Now,
It
did
really
you
is.
have a kind of what was your spiritual background, I guess, maybe prior to that? Were you a man of faith or kind of maybe more atheist, new age, whatever? But, how did this sort of um, relate to where you were prior to your experience?
I was raised Roman Catholic, and I kind of fell out of, I don't want to say out of love, but I kind of fell out of the organized religion
Hmm.
after seeing the priest abuse scandals. I'm like, this is disgusting. And, in my head, religion was just a way to kind of control people, organized religion.
Hmm.
So I consider myself spiritual, maybe not. I'm not that religious. I believe in God and I have my own relationship with Him, but,
Yeah.
I'm not a Bible thumper, and I don't,
Yeah.
you know, I don't put anything on people who are extremely religious. That's their deal. Definitely not mine. And through all my journeys with ayahuasca, I've always sensed that it's the universe talking to me as opposed to God Himself. A lot of people get religious affiliations in their journeys. I've not had that. So, but I have felt like the universe has been speaking
Yeah.
to me directly.
Right. Now, I hear sometimes that people can have a very profound experience, within a short period of time of the trip, like your ayahuasca ceremony, but that the integration piece is almost as important as the actual experience itself. How did that integration piece go for you? Were you able to kind of keep all the momentum that you had built going, or did you struggle a little bit with kind of not reverting back to maybe some of the ways you felt prior?
Yeah, it's a good question. And first off, I want to point out that it's not the medicine that heals you. Everything is internal. The
Mm-hmm.
medicine kind of breaks down the walls that have been
Mm.
surrounding you. Theo Vaughn's got the best definition I've
So
ever
glad
heard.
you said
He
that.
said, ayahuasca gives you the keys to unlock the doors to the rooms in which you've been trapped.
Mm.
So, as miraculous as it's been, it's not like
Yeah.
ayahuasca
Right.
changed me and I'm going to be forever fine.
Right.
Integration is super important. The integration the day after, I think, is a beautiful thing when
Mm.
you're at the facility because everyone talks about what brought them there, their experience, and what they want to do forward. And you're talking about some of the most devastatingly intimate things you could, sexual abuse. I mean, it's some profound pain that people experience.
Mm.
And dude, I can't tell you how many times I've cried hearing other people's stories. But to me, it's cathartic in its own way for everyone to hear everyone else's stories. But yeah, you need to. It's beautiful that it helps you, and I think it catapults you. It's like 10 years of therapy in one weekend.
Right.
But you need to, and sometimes I fall off the horse myself. You need to have other methods, whether it's journaling, um, whether it's reading books. You need to stay, and obviously
Mm-hmm.
eating healthy, staying in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the medicine itself is not going to keep you on track. You need to stay on track, or else you will fall back into bad habits.
Sure.
It's like a catapult to get you where you need to be, but it's incumbent upon you to stay there. And I was actually just journaling. I just started journaling today. I don't know why I've been putting it off for so long, but I still have an anger problem here and there.
Yeah.
Nothing crazy, but I was journaling and reading what you're feeling. I don't know, man. It hits you in a different way when you're reading what you wrote as opposed to just thinking about it. And I think it's a great thing, especially for men. You don't have to tell anyone. It's your own thing. You can write in your journal. You can read your journal. It's like you have to share it with anyone else if it's something you don't want to do.
Right.
We're very very suspect, not suspect. What we're very tough on ourselves. Again, feeling vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
and it's tough to do. That's probably the biggest thing that I take away from
Mm.
ayahuasca is it let me be vulnerable.
Mm.
And I remember doing a Facebook Live the Tuesday after we got back. It's like 35 minutes. I kind of was telling everyone what I was going through, and I was crying. And I got done with it, and I told my wife, I'm like, I never would have been able to do this prior to
Mm.
ayahuasca. And had I done so, I would have been so embarrassed about crying. But I was so proud of myself. And I got 3 calls the next day from good
Wow.
friends who were going through it. I had no idea. One of which had a gun in his mouth in a not too distant past. It blew me away. And I told my wife, I'm like, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
Because you have no idea what's going on in anyone else's head, man. People let you see what they want you to see of them.
Yeah. So true, man. It's so true. And I think like we're building a movement just by talking about it because there's nothing that you are saying or I have said or any of my guests that has been like completely new in a sense,
No,
but it's like it's just you don't know what the right message is that's going to affect that the one person. If you can affect one person and save one person's life, and make change and be like, hey, I resonate with the way Mike put it, and I think that's how you really create this like groundswell movement that is going to change, the way, honestly, fucking society, the world, you know.
yeah,
Now
that's true.
with regard to journaling, what's like if you were to give somebody kind of who had never really heard of journaling or like, how do I even start? I don't have anything to fucking say. What do I write about? What would you tell them? How could you maybe get them going on that path?
I would say we all have something to say, and you absolutely have something to say. What? How are you feeling? And you're probably if we're talking about journaling, you're probably in a space right now where you're feeling something, whether
Hmm.
it's angst, anxiety, depression, or whatever it may be.
Hmm.
Write it down, man. Just
Right.
literally, just talk about your feelings.
Right.
And try to figure out if you can the source of those feelings. And this is the hardest thing to do. Be honest with yourself, because listen, man, looking in that mirror and being honest with yourself is the hardest we could do, especially as men. Why are you feeling the way you're feeling? Have you put yourself there? Can you get yourself out? If you can't, raise your hand and ask for help, because that's the one thing, man. No one is coming to your fucking house and throwing you over their shoulder. You have to raise your hand and ask for help. I did, but there's help out there. But I will tell you one thing: like, if you do nothing, promise you nothing will change.
Hmm.
You know, keep doing it your way. Like Taylor and I were talking one day, and he was talking about how guys, tell him they're on the fence about, getting coached by him or doing mindset stuff. And like, no, I think I can do this. And I was like, Taylor, you can't miss, man. How's that worked out so far for you?
Hmm.
You're here talking to me, so apparently that's not working. What's going
Right.
to change?
Right.
I had a buddy of mine hit me up about a month ago. He's like, I was watching your podcast with Taylor, and I realized I had to talk to you, but I felt so strange. So I was watching another podcast, and halfway through, I started crying, man. I hit the pause button, and I left you that message. And he's talking to me. He's like, listen, bro. He's like, who the fuck else is going to understand what I'm talking about but another cop? But even if I tell another cop, no one's touched their feelings. So how the fuck are they going to talk to me? He's like, you don't touch your feelings, man. Like you cried and you're not embarrassed
Yeah.
about it.
Right.
He's like,
Right.
I could talk to you and you could talk to me honestly, man. You're not going to be guarded. I'm like, yeah, brother, listen, a year ago, I couldn't have done that to you. I couldn't have spoken to you and being that vulnerable. Now, I've been gifted uh, that faculty that I can do that because
Mm.
if it can help someone else, that's what I tell my guests, man. I'm bringing you on to change someone's life. They're going to see you be vulnerable and they're going to realize, just like happened to me. In fact, I had Zach Ferguson, he's a former SEAL on, and during the course of his interview, he cried and I cried. And I hit the record button. We got done. I'm like, bro, that's fucking beautiful. I'm like, someone's going to see a Navy SEAL crying and you just
Yeah.
change their life. I
Right.
guarantee it.
Right. Right.
And I think it's beautiful, man.
Totally. I mean, I think the 10 years ago, it was, and even to this day to an extent, but it's like, I think what people tuned in for, an interview with a Navy SEAL, a SWAT officer, whatever this is to hear about like the cool shit. What was Bud's like? What was this? That stuff's still cool. Like
Yeah.
it's still worth talking about it because it sets up the dichotomy. But now the other side of that coin is how much strength does it take to be vulnerable publicly and to kind of, in spite of being mentally tough and fucking able to suffer and able to be strong in that way, how can you also be supple and vulnerable? And I think that is sort of the message that people need to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I had Jimmy Watson on recently, and Jimmy's hard as nails. Jimmy, and he cried during the course of it. And again, we got done. I'm like, brother, that was beautiful. Like, someone's going to see you, and you
Yeah.
just changed at least one person's life, man. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a place, man. I mean, I went for training last year with GBRS Group.
Yeah.
So I drank in March, and I went in April. And DJ Shipley and I
Oh,
kind of
shit.
got in this deep conversation about our individual journeys. And he was Ibogaine, obviously I was ayahuasca, and
Uh,
we were just talking about what we were going through prior to. And he's like, Mike, I just had this anger thing, man. I would, slap my kids and my wife, and I didn't want to do it. And afterwards, I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? But I couldn't control myself. And he's like, now, man, life's beautiful. And I'm like, DJ, I don't care what uniform we wear, man. We're humans first, but we callous up so much. It's a self-preservation, man, because we can't take
mhm.
on all this pain.
Yeah.
But then we turn around and we don't feel shit, bro.
Right.
What the fuck is life if you feel nothing, man? Life is beautiful. But if
Right.
you go through and you're hating anything and everything and everyone, what's the point?
Yeah. No shit. Well, what was like the hardest part for you, like or your biggest challenge after your ayahuasca ceremony? Was there anything that, it kind of felt like you were struggling with maybe some of the symptoms that you were experiencing before, or what was the hardest part since then?
Yeah, good question. Sometimes I'll kind of not be as aggressive with my integration as you should be, like with the journaling,
Mm-hmm.
or,
Mm-hmm.
I tend to get self-isolate. So,
Mm-hmm.
it's funny. I started this podcast, but I'll get this imposter syndrome. Like, who the fuck are you to be doing a podcast?
Yeah.
And, I get down on myself. I'm like, nah, man, cut that shit out.
Good.
Like, you've been through what you've been through to help others. Don't think about what, how good someone else is doing, and you shouldn't be here because they have 4 million followers. It's
Yeah.
not about that. Think about affecting that
Right.
one life, and that's it. So, yeah,
Right.
sometimes you tend to kind of fall back. Nothing crazy, but again, like, I have this anger thing every now and then. I'll
Mm-hmm.
slap my wife, and I don't mean to do it. So, That's probably my biggest thing.
Yeah.
I want to be the best husband I can. I absolutely love my wife. She's the best. And, you're trying to be this perfect person in some respects, and you're never going to be.
Mm.
So it's great that I have the awareness that,
Mm.
when I do things, that I'm doing them. If
Yeah.
you go through and you're not
Right.
self-aware and people are like, yo, what the fuck are you doing, bro? If you don't see that, that's a big problem. When
Dude,
you see it, at least it's correctable. And,
right.
you go on from there. Because listen, it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
Again, you're never going to achieve perfection, but you got to try your best. And if you see yourself falling, hey man, pick it up in that respect.
Dude, 100%. Yeah, I think one of the hardest things that I struggle with is, um, it's like detaching from the outcome, because I know my worth. I know that I should be fucking doing better in this regard. I know I should be, achieving more. And or you get on yourself like, dude, what the fuck? Like, why aren't you working harder, spending more time doing this? I got a random email today, and it was from like one of these like podcast ranking things. I have no idea, but it hits me up and it's like, congratulations, the mind body mushroom is ranked 115th in the alternative wellness in Italy.
That's awesome, bro.
You're like, what the fuck is that even like a ranking though? You know what I mean? You're like,
Yeah,
dude, but and I have thought in the past, I'm like, I'm not doing anything really to promote this outside of like posting about it every now and then. But then you kind of like get in your head, and that little fucking voice comes in and goes, dude, what am I doing? There's so many podcasts, there's so many, impressive people, fucking SEAL Team 6, all this shit. Like, why does anyone want to hear what I have to say? I'm 115th in an obscure category in Italy. you know
that's
but
great.
it's reminding yourself that, like, dude, it's fuck the outcome. Who cares
Yep,
about the outcome? It's just stepping up to the plate and fucking going through the motions and doing it because it's the act of, it's the journey, not the destination, kind of. you know
exactly.
and that's something that I struggle with for sure.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us do, and we need to stop with that shit because
Yeah.
you don't have to be Sean Ryan with 4 million viewers. Like I said, you change
Right.
one person's life. For instance, a few months ago, about 6 months ago, I got hit on my Instagram, DM by this former cop in the Midwest, and he said, "My buddy saw your stuff and turned me on to you." And I love your message. And we started going. He was going through PTSD, deep depression. He was on antidepressants. So told him about available remedies. I'm not the professional, but I kind of,
Right.
I'll tell you about what I've been through, and if
Mm.
you need additional, I'll help you direct you to different places.
Mm.
And um, sent into my buddy Wiz Buckley. He's a former F-18 pilot. He
Mm.
runs a foundation called No Fallen Heroes. They provide psychedelic therapies to first responders, vets, Gold Star family members, and family members of those three categories.
Oh, wow.
And I said, apply for a grant with No Fallen Heroes, and Wiz's organization will take you to a facility, and you can experience the psychedelics. So sure enough, he went about a month ago to. Dan Costello is a former NHLer. He's got a place in Oregon. Experience Onward is the name of his place.
Mm.
So the Monday after he went, I got this email. He's like, Mike, you know, you changed my life. I had the greatest weekend of my life. He's like, I will never touch those antidepressants again.
Wow.
I've experienced so much love. He's like, my life has changed. He's like, I want to turn four guys that I know onto this. And I'm like, that's why I do this, man.
Yeah.
That one text blew me away. Like I just
Fuck,
changed a
man.
man's life.
Right.
Not only his life, everyone, you know, that's touched by him, family,
There's ripple.
friends. It's like a
Yeah.
spider web
Yeah.
in
Right.
a windshield crack.
Right. Right.
All these other people are affected, and God forbid that man takes his life. All those people are affected negatively, but man, not only is not taking his life, now his life is changed, and he's
Huh.
bringing that level of happiness to everyone around him. It's a beautiful thing, so
Dude.
fulfilling.
Oh, that's amazing. That actually kind of leads me to my next question, which is, what does it mean now to you to be a protector, after shedding the uniform?
Um, to be a protector, I guess I've kind of evolved into something else. Now I'm still serving, but it's in a different manner. And honestly, to me, this is listen, man, I've literally saved people's lives. I've done CPR for people that are dead, brought them back to life. I've made impacts on people's lives, but I don't know. It just feels even more so here.
Right.
Um, Again, I look at my coworkers that committed suicide and their kids that have to live with that. Man, if I could just save one person from not doing that, because they don't realize, man, these poor guys, they think that burdens, you know, they think they're releasing a burden. No, man, you're putting that burden onto your family when you commit suicide.
Right.
These kids growing up, they're wondering if they're the cause of what you did. And that's how you create drug addicts, man. That's how you create prostitutes. That's how child trafficking is created, because these kids need love. And if they're not getting it from their pops, and mom goes into this, deep, dark abyss, they're going to seek it somewhere else, and they're going to find it from somewhere else. It's going to be from very unhealthy places.
Right.
So the impacts that are made are just incalculable.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like we kind of started this podcast talking about, is that like in some ways the root of your trauma starts, it's that cycle of violence, you know what I mean? Your trauma starts from the generation before that, and maybe the reason your father was the way he was with you is because the way his father or mother was with
Yeah.
him, and you know what I mean? And so it's like, it's the best thing you could possibly do is try breaking that cycle and just becoming a beacon of like love, empathy, modeling all the behaviors that in retrospect were the things that you needed,
Yep.
as a child. um
Generational trauma is a killer.
right now, what's something that you believe now that you would have never believed 5 years ago?
Again, I guess it would probably have to do with all vulnerability and showing emotion. I always thought it was weakness. I was literally brought up, told by my father it was weakness. Um, it is so healthy to be able to express yourself, and
Mm,
it just, listen, once you get healthy, you're able to have healthy relationships.
mm,
I talk about, you see guys and girls that you're friends with, and they're in these relationships with people that don't deserve them, and you're like, what the fuck are you doing? But they don't value themselves, or the
mm,
self-esteem is so low, and
mhm.
it's because of stuff that they've experienced. Now when they heal and they become healthy humans again, man, they're going to look at people and they're going to make them come up to their level as opposed to going down to other people's. And I think that's the most valuable thing you can tell someone is, you know literally just getting raw, vulnerable, and showing them that, especially guys, alpha males, that feeling, expressing what you're feeling is not weakness. It's actually a sign of strength. It's
Mhm.
not easy to do.
Mhm.
It's not easy to come on here. It may seem like it, but for me to like bare my soul and talk about all my misdeeds, man, I talk about everything, and I fucked up. I got hooked on painkillers. Had to go to rehab in 2012. Never thought I'd be able to go speak
Wow.
publicly about that. It's humiliating, but I'm at peace with that now. I forgive myself.
Right.
But it's just another piece of the puzzle now. I can help guys and girls. You have a substance abuse problem? Hey, man, I know
Been
exactly
there.
what you're talking about.
Dude,
Let's get you some help.
I feel like recovering addicts are literally some of the most accepting people, in the world. Like, they're the least judgmental. They're like such a beautiful soul in a way, because like they've hit rock bottom, and
Hmm.
if you can pull yourself up and stop causing like that cycle of violence, it's like nothing really phases you. There's nothing that you've been so embarrassed by your own fucking actions that like how can anything that anybody else does embarrass you, you know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah, yeah. It's all matter
Totally.
of fact. Like, all
Right.
right,
Yeah, cool.
let's work with that, man.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
talk about it. It's nothing that's going to shock. No one's coming to me with anything. Listen, you tell me you dropped the family of four, maybe we have a problem. But short of that, you come to me with anything that you're going through, and I'm gonna be like, all right, brother,
Right.
let's explore that, man. Let's get you help. Let's do what we have to do. Absolutely.
Yeah. Mike, this has been awesome. Do you have anything to leave, like any last thoughts before we go? And then I want to let you plug kind of any of your social media, anything you got going on as well.
Yeah, thank you. I would say, just things that I've already said. It's okay to not be okay. You are not alone. all of us think that we're the only one going through it, man. There are thousands of men and women going through everything we're going through. You know, there's a finite amount of emotions that we can experience, and we're all experiencing them. You know, it's funny. Taylor and I were talking, and Taylor was referencing two SEALs, very well-known SEALs, and he thought they had their shit together, man. They could do no wrong, and then their life kind of fell apart. He's like, "Bro, I was so shocked." And we were talking about it. I'm like, "Brother, none of us know what the fuck
Yeah.
is going on inside another man's head."
Right.
And you know, that brings me to another point. If you guys are talking to someone and you ask a man how he's doing, he's like, "I'm all right." That
Mhm.
man's not all right.
Mhm.
He's trying to tell you
Mhm.
to delve deeper into what's going
Mhm.
on, and don't think you're prying. Because if he didn't want you to ask, he would have been like, "I'm cool, bro. Everything's good,
Right.
man. Good. I'm Gucci." You know, for a man to kind of let you in and see that something's not okay with him, dive deeper. You know, it's I promise you, if your intuition's telling you something's going on with them, something's going on with them.
Yeah.
And you're gonna hate yourself if you don't ask and God forbid something happens to that person. So, you know, that's one of my biggest things, because everyone knows a first responder vet. It doesn't have to be us. It could be a
Yeah.
civilian, you know,
Totally.
anyone in your life who's going through it. You know, don't let them get away with that, you know, saying that you didn't want to pry. You're not prying. They're actually opening the door for you. Just fucking open it a little more and walk through it.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, a lot of attention goes to kind of military and first response within this whole plant medicine, holistic wellness, you know, but it absolutely extends beyond that. And I think what's so great about, you know, us being the flag bearers for this movement is that it kind of unifies the country, like, all, you know, left, right, white, black, upper, lower, like, we're everyone is fucking going through something. And
Yep.
I think this is it's like the Venn diagram overlaps, and it's like, who, if these people can fucking rally behind, you know, these treatments, these modalities, and open up to, you know, hey, it's okay, it's all right to not be all right, like, that kind of gives this like implicit permission to everyone else that
Yeah.
it's okay and it's acceptable. Dude, fucking the governor Rick Perry of Texas, former governor,
Yeah.
you know, like, guys as straight as an arrow. And you know, he did a 3-hour podcast on Joe Rogan about
Yeah. Him and
ivermectin.
Halberg.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, you know, and so it's like it is really this, you know, bipartisan overlapping fields of fire of like, we got this, it's okay to fucking talk about this and move this along because we all benefit from this is how we're going to fix society in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
by being vulnerable.
Absolutely. And people don't realize the brainwashing that we received by Big Pharma. And it
Dude.
continues to this day.
Yeah.
You know, they have their hands in everything. And if you don't think that they have an effect on doctors, in
Mm-hmm.
fact, I have someone kind of close to me that's got Parkinson's,
Mm.
and ibogaine and psilocybin have been showing to ease the symptoms
Wow.
greatly. And I
Wow.
kind of turned him on to that, and he went and spoke to his doctor, and his doctor like nixed it.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Sure.
fuck that.
Yeah.
Don't listen to him, man.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, first of all, as a doctor, if someone comes to you that, how do you just turn that down point blank? Do some research on your own. You're talking about Parkinson's, man.
Right.
The quality of life that people experience when they start getting deeper and deeper into that illness, it's devastating. And you're telling me there's potentially something that can help them, and you're just going to shut it down like
Yeah.
that?
Like,
Fuck.
yeah.
I told him, I dropped that doc immediately,
Yeah.
and I put him
Yeah.
onto several sources, including an ibogaine doctor. I'm like, contact this doctor, bro. And
Right.
you know, I'm going to see him in a short amount of time, but I want to talk to him more. We've been brainwashed by big pharma. There are
100%.
things out there that can help us that have been used for thousands of years that have that stigma attached to them, and
Mm-hmm.
it should be the opposite way around.
Yeah. Yeah. No shit, dude.
They want us
100%.
hooked. That's how they
100%.
make their money, man. They want you hooked on that chronic medication.
Yeah, absolutely. I interviewed this guy named Kagan Gill, and
Oh, so did I.
oh,
Great guy.
dude, yeah, the
Yeah.
story's incredible.
His story's
Also,
insane.
dude,
Yeah.
absolutely insane. But yeah,
Yep.
I mean, it's one of those things where it's like it's the profit motive is to prescribe, you know, and then there's that, you know, there's that book like Deny, Delay, Depose, you know, it's
Yeah.
like how health insurance companies, they sort of, you know, delay the intervention that will help you, so that they can prescribe you something that then you will get hooked to, and then fuck it, you may just OD before anyone has to really do anything about it.
Yep.
And great, that's the name of the game. Yeah, it's fucked up, but
Yeah, it really is.
we're changing it. So, Mike,
Exactly.
this has been awesome, man. You want to tell people where to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. The best way to get to me is the Resilient Warrior 5778 on Instagram, and my podcast is on YouTube. I guess Spotify, Apple, all the other non video ones, but it is the Resilient Warrior Nation podcast. And, I'd love to have you guys watch it. My guests are ordinary people who've done extraordinary things with their lives. And I promise you, they will inspire you with their stories. So if you guys are going through it, need some inspiration, some hope, everyone talks about their lowest of lows because we've all fucking been there. Everyone is going through it. It's just a question of who hides it better.
Yeah. Amazing. All right, man. Well, this has been great. I'm going to send you some coffee, and let's connect
Absolutely.
offline for a second. But this has
Yeah,
been a
brother.
Mind Body Mushroom. Mike Morgan, give him a follow, check out his podcast, and thanks for joining.
Thank you, Jordan.